Hey everyone, it's Kat. Welcome to a really exciting video where I'll be showing you how I cut up and transformed my regular size brown traveler's notebook cover into a pocket size cover. So that's already been done. I don't have the notebook before I cut it up to show you, just because I kind of did it in this manic midnight session. So I have footage from that, but it doesn't look very nice, so you have to bear with me as I walk through the process. But this decision to cut up that notebook is actually a very, very long time coming. Don't think I just capriciously decided to cut up a work of art. I really know how expensive these traveler's notebooks are, and more than that, this particular notebook held a lot of sentimental value for me. It was actually my very first traveler's notebook ever. So I've owned it for 9 years, 7 of which were spent in a drawer because I just simply didn't take to the dimensions of the regular size traveler's notebook, which is quite long. But I still remember the first time I quote unquote met this notebook. It was 9 years ago in my first year of university. And at the time it was exorbitantly expensive for me. All the money I made at the time was through tutoring primary school children for a few hours a week. I think the notebook alone cost me about 4 hours worth of wages. But when I finally received it, I remember that moment so clearly in my mind. I was sitting in the business department building at a random table in a corner. It was in between tutorials for that day. I had watched so many TN unboxing videos by that point that I knew when I opened it there was going to be a dust bag, a spare elastic, an insert and everything. But even then, when I finally pulled the notebook out of the dust bag, I was just completely floored. The leather was so beautiful. And the last leather notebook I had owned up until that point was this handmade one that I bought when I was 12 years old at a local fair. Oh, I introduced in my last video actually, so it's this one. And yeah, it's handmade, so it's not the best in terms of leather quality. So I didn't own anything that could have prepared me for how nice the traveler's notebook leather was going to be. And it just knocked all my expectations out of the park. And that moment was love at first sight. And it's a magic feeling that I've been trying to capture every single day since. So anyway, so as much as I love Traveler's Notebook's leather, one thing that always really bothered me about their system was their size range. So Traveler's Notebooks come in either a passport size or a regular size. And I mentioned before that the regular size just wasn't doing it for me. The passport size I've really enjoyed so far, but one thing I came to find was that finding passport-sized bound notebooks that lay flat and had good fountain paper ink was really difficult because passport is a less common size in the industry. I found a lot of pocket-sized notebooks, which is, I think, half an inch longer this way compared to a passport. So the Field Notes is a pocket-sized notebook, and it's just a little bit taller up here compared to the passport size that Traveler's Factory carries. And so one of the reasons why I decided to cut into my old TN instead of buying a new leather cover is I just really don't trust the leather of other brands, even the more high-end brands like Knox or Filofax. I personally really prefer leather that I can smell and feel its grain and leave my marks on. I don't want a perfect polished notebook that feels like a handbag. I want something that feels personal and feels like it could age with me, something that I can map my journeys together and you can see evidence of just from looking at its cover. So enough rambling about why I decided to do this. So let's go through some of the inspiration behind what I wanted my final notebook to look like. So I made some sketches in my field notes, and here we go. I toyed around with the idea of having a pocket at the front. So I was thinking either a pocket that was stitched at the bottom or on the side. Also thought about potentially having a leather clasp, but in the end this would have clashed with any pocket design, so I decided to go with a pocket instead because it seemed more functional. And I don't mind the Traveler's Notebook elastic system. Also toyed with the idea of putting a pen loop inside the cover, sort of what you see with the Galen leather designs. I also looked at some of the Bomkuchen custom options on their website to get a little bit of inspiration. So they also offer pockets on the front. They also offer pen loops on the side. And making a pen loop was something I decided would be important for me because the Traveler's Factory pen loops, these ones, they don't fit a lot of the bulkier, thicker fountain pens. And I wanted something that I'd be able to use my fountain pens on. So I know this says final design, but this is actually not even the final design that I ended up going with. So I guess you'll have to watch until the end of the video to see what the notebook looks like. But this isn't going to be a very in-depth tutorial, but I'm going to try to be as helpful as I can with linking the resources that I used so that you can at least use this video as a starting point if you want to do something similarly reckless. Let me quickly go through some of the tools that I used. So the tools that I had at home already were this hammer, a set of tweezers, and then what I bought from the craft store is something called an awl, AWL, and this is specifically for leatherworking. It's essentially a giant needle with a handle, and this is to create the holes in the leather so that I could stitch with. And I bought a set of needles. These are just yarn needles. And then finally a bit of waxed cord. I'm not too sure what the composition of this is, but I saw online that nylon or polyester would be good for leather. I also have an X-Acto knife, a cutting board, and a ruler. So this footage is from the night that I decided to cut up my beautiful brown regular size traveler's notebook. And yeah, sometimes I wonder why this was the night that I had to do this, but I just felt compelled to. And the first thing I do is to take out the little knob at the top of all our traveler's notebooks, which keeps the elastic binder in place. And so I used the tweezer to open it up. Inside was a knot, which I undid. And there were two ends of the elastic. After that, I could just pull it out from the notebook and just remove it while I decided how to cut up this notebook. So I decided to cut from the bottom because in the notebook design, I wanted there to be a pocket at the front of the notebook. And I specifically wanted the Traveler's Notebook logo, which is usually at the back left corner of these notebooks, to be relocated to be that new pocket. So I decided to cut from the bottom of the notebook, even though that meant that the elastic hole is now going to sit a little weirdly in my new notebook. And here I'm admiring my work, and I was really pleased to see that once I cut the leather, the sides were still brown. I was really worried they'd be a different, maybe lighter beige color, and that the cuts would be really obvious. But actually it was, just a nice brown, like the notebook itself. And here I am cutting the pocket that I wanted to go on the front cover of my notebook. It was actually really nerve-wracking to do this. I had to really hype myself up to make the first cut. After the first cut, it was much easier. So that's me sizing up how the pocket was going to look. Now I'm making some notches on the leather to see how far apart I should make the holes so that I could start stitching with. So here I'm using the awl that I recently bought and a hammer to make the sewing holes. Here's some better footage of the next day where I decided to just make the holes directly through both the leathers. So after that, I took a bit of the waxed thread. I threaded both ends of the thread, and I followed this YouTube video on how to stitch leather, which I will link in my description. Please watch that video if you actually intend to do some leather work, leather sewing, because I don't show it that well. But if you wanted to know, I put through one of the needles on the very first hole, and then for the second, I would put the left needle in, and then I'd hold it down, and in the same hole, but trying not to pick up that thread, I'd put the right needle through the same holes. And then after that, I'd pull both ends tight, and then repeat the same process for the next hole. And it's a pretty slow process the way I'm doing it. If you watch the video I linked, she has a pretty cool setup, like a clamp that holds the leather pieces in place, and it's all really fast, but I get there in the end. And this is how the notebook's looking so far. At this point, I decided to reuse the Traveler's Notebook clamp system for the elastics because I didn't like the way that the elastics, the knot looked hanging out and about. So I retook that clamp, I threaded through the elastics in 2 of the holes, and then in the main hole area, I tied a knot, a double knot. Once I made sure that was tight, I made sure that it was inside the clamp. I snipped off the ends, and then I used a set of tweezers to squeeze it all really tightly shut. So that's all nicely fused together now. And yeah, I put back my field notes to test it out, and at this point I was really loving how this looked, and the whole process of making it was just really fun. More fun than I expected. I've been a little bit stressed from work, so doing something with my hands like this was just the sort of escape that I needed, something mindless but made me feel like connected to something that I love very much. And leatherworking was actually a lot more forgiving and easier than I thought. I've made lots and lots of mistakes here where I've put holes in places where there shouldn't be holes, but you can't really tell. And so at this point, I am adding in the pen clip that I wanted. And I was really debating whether I should do this or not because I did like how the notebook looked without the pen holder, but I decided to go ahead because the Traveler's Notebook pen clips, as I mentioned before, just didn't hold my fountain pens, and I needed a solution to that. So I sewed the pen holder on to the cover, and that was the very last thing that I did for this notebook. Okay, I hope I explained all that well. Now I'm going to show you the final product, which I'm so excited for. Oh, and by the way, I bought this Leuchtturm 1917 for it's my first time trying out this notebook, and I got this because I heard that it's got better fountain pen friendly paper than the Moleskine. So I'm going to be using this for my notebook. And as for the notebook itself, ta-da, here it is. So this is the pen loop that I decided to go with. I essentially just sewed on both sides in the middle so that I can slot at least 2 pens in there. And I think having 2 pens is actually really important for me. One is just not enough if you're on the go. So these are the final details. This is the original elastic loop that it came out of, and these are the 2 that I made. This is from a mistake. And apart from that, everything else is quite similar to a classic passport size traveler's notebook, but as you can see, it's quite a lot taller, so that it can fit hopefully all my other pocket notebooks. So I purchased the Leuchtturm lined notebook, and these notebooks are already numbered at the bottom here, and this is the hardcover in black. I'm just going to tuck away the elastic that comes with it. It fits perfectly, thank goodness, there's no overhang. This looks like a real notebook. I wonder if it'd be possible to add in my field notes to this. So the Leuchtturm is a little bit longer than my field notes. Thankfully, my cover is long enough to hold it all in. Minimal overhang. I think that actually looks great. So one special thing with how I wanted this pen holder to be used is actually to clip the pens in like this. And so in this way, if I have a very, very chunky fountain pen, like this really popular Kaweco Sport, instead of trying to make it fit unsuccessfully the body of the pen through the pen loop, I can just put the pen clip in like this. Obviously it means that you have to have a fountain pen with a pen clip, but they usually do come with one. And then, yeah, I can just take it around like this. Just something so beautiful about this. Some other little details that I love about this cover is the fact that I managed to preserve Traveler's notebook, which is usually at the back of the notebook. So if we look at my passport size, it's here. I managed to preserve that and put it at the front as a pocket, which I think came out looking incredibly cute. It's just a little detail that, yeah, makes the notebook. It's not as minimal as the original cover, but I think it looks better like this. I also put in my brass charm, and I lost actually that little loop that affixes it to the elastic, so I've used a piece of the bookmark thread in the original regular size notebook, and I just tied it on using a little bow. And I think that looks just so much cuter like that. But yeah, everything about this cover is wrapped up in so many memories for me. I remember these odd-looking parallel scratches here were the very first scratches I got on this notebook. And it's from when I put the notebook in my uni backpack with my film camera, and it got all scratched up. And I was devastated at the time, but then I realized it would be the first of many scratches that made up the unique imprint on this notebook that reflected its experience and journey with me. And now that this is completely transformed, it does make me a little bit sad to not have my friend in its original form, but hopefully I can bring this guy along to more of my adventures instead of sitting around and rotting in my bookcase. And I hope it can facilitate a lot more magic in terms of how I see the world and record the world around me. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.